All right, while you guys are posting questions, that's good. Questions coming in. Let's start off
over here
with,
if you want to read.
Oh, cool.
Let's start off with an easy question. Stopping rules. When should I stop my A/B test? Ton,
When it's past the time you've decided up front.
elaborate.
Well, you can calculate up front how much traffic you need or conversions. And then you set the test, like starting this day, and it will end this day, taking consideration business cycles if you can. So like starts now, stops in 2 weeks, and then it's done. Then you just stop it.
That is the correct answer.
So I'll elaborate a little bit. This is a common mistake that you should not stop when it becomes statistically significant. That will get you a very large positive rate. You should try, like Ton said, to decide the duration in advance. We recommend a multiple of weeks so that you get the day of week effect equally. We do extend some experiments. The risk is that you're doing multiple hypothesis testing. But if you extend only once by another period like a week, then we allow our experimenters to do that.
And just to keep in mind, this is when you're doing a sort of classic statistical analysis of a test. If you're using these new stats models like Optimizely Stats Engine, it gives you a little bit more flexibility. And when you call tests, we still recommend that you account for intraday seasonality and also make sure that you're calling tests when you have a representative sample of visitors, regardless of what type of statistical model you're using.
Ron, you said we should test for multiple weeks, but how long is too long? When should I, for sure, stop my test? It's gone on too long.
Well, so we power up our experiments so that they are typically designed to run 1 or 2 weeks. We do run long tests, the longitudinal tests, to look for novelty effects and primacy effects. Those will typically run for 2 to 3 months. We don't run more than that just because of cookie churn issues. You tend to lose users because of cookie churn. This has been documented. We have written about it. And so unless you have a site that requires users to sign in, there's so much cookie loss for unsigned sites that running over a couple of months is not very effective.
And it's also not high energy. If you run a test for so long, if you're in this lean approach of build, measure, learn, it's a different approach. It's got to have a different reason.
As I said, those are rare.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say, and this was one of the talks here, the fact that you run a test for 2 months doesn't mean you don't continue to do other things. So we run concurrent experiments, and there's going to be one test that runs for 2 months, and there'll be 200 other tests that are running concurrently with that. No problem. I mean, we do check for interactions, but in general, there is not a problem with running concurrent tests.
How many conversions did you have on your website? You have so many conversions. You can run multiple tests at a time. That's the difference with other people.
So for the rest of us,
remember, I'm not just running on Bing. We run on multiple sites.
I know.
So if we don't have Bing type of traffic, but we want to test lots of things, how many variations should we test at once? So, A/B, ABC, how many is good? How many is better?
If you don't have a lot of traffic, and you're just getting started, I really just recommend starting with the A/B test. I think people get really excited when they think about split testing and they go, oh, I want to do 6 different versions of this. What you want to do, especially if you're traffic constrained, is test quickly and draw conclusions quickly to build that sort of repository of knowledge that makes your testing program moving forward really valuable. So I always recommend starting simpler rather than more complex. As you grow along the maturity curve in your testing program, go wild, do multivariate and all sorts of crazy stuff. But when you're just getting started and your site are traffic constrained, A/B testing is the way to go.
We usually recommend running 3 or 4 just to get people to try something that they think will lose and will get surprised. So a lot of the times people say, this is the real, there's control, and this is what my designer told me to run, and I'm going to test it. We're like, can you get the designer to come up with 2 diverse designs so that we will learn, so the designer will learn which one is the winner?
We only do A/B experimenting. In that case, we should do A/B, AC, for the whole reason of cookie deletion issues and cross-device issues. If you have A and B, and someone enters the wrong variation, it's only a 50% chance of entering the wrong variation, or 25 if you divide it. If you have A, B, C, you have a 2/3 chance of entering the wrong variation. So,
but these are equal, right? The chance of you falling into another one is the same as them falling into you. So it adds noise to the experiment.
Yeah.
You lose some power, but the validity of the experiment is correct.
Yeah.
That's what we care about.
Awesome. Well, let's get into the audience questions here. So, first question, do you ever go back and retest previous winners? Like, what won 6 months ago? Is it still a winner? Do we know?
Yes. So there's the ideal way to do this, I think, is having a holdback. So holding back 5 or 10% of your traffic on the original version and trending that over a long period of time to see if you don't just have those day-by-day seasonality issues, but if you have month-by-month seasonality things that can impact your conversion rate. I think the other time we really recommend, and then intermittent going back and testing and baselining your results to see if they still hold. I think the other time we recommend retesting things is when you test during a highly seasonal time of your business. So if you're e-commerce and you run tests in November and December, definitely rerun those in January and February. We've seen a lot of effects where tests that happen in highly seasonal traffic times end up not getting the same results in later months. So those are the times when we recommend running different tests or running the tests again.
Yeah, so I agree with the recommendation. When you run and you have a successful experiment, reversing it is a good idea. It allows you to confirm that when you ship, you actually get the effect that you want. We have a notion of certifications. Team get credit for something, and you only need to worry about that for the certification of your flights. But I think the question was different. Was it, do you run something after 6 months? Teams get to prioritize whatever they want. They have this portfolio of ideas. Some of them are to retest something because something has changed. It may be that our own website has changed. It may be that the industry standards are switching. They get to run that. I do see people running some experiments again. The results don't change as much as people hope, right? The experiment failed 6 months ago. They're really hopeful by now the industry moved on and they will win. It's rare.
You're optimizing user journeys, so you're creating this story of this user segment, and you're learning and learning from your experiments, and repeating the same experiment. That can be a decision to do if some circumstances have changed, but to really retest it and lose testing capacity to that retest, as long as it adds to the user journey and the story you're writing, then it's cool. If not, it's prioritizing your tests. If it's not that important to retest it, don't do it. Other stuff is more important.
Awesome, awesome. Let's move on. So, frequentist versus Bayesian statistics. Is one better than the other?
So I think that no matter what, I mean, that's what I was talking about earlier, no matter what sort of statistical model you use to evaluate tests, statistics can be used for grave evil. And I think what you really need to understand, regardless of what method you use, is am I applying this method with statistical rigor and discipline, and do I hold myself accountable to that? And so I think there are a lot of options when it comes to what type of analysis and what type of statistical analysis you do. Pick one and understand it and execute it with discipline. I think there are benefits to both models, but I think you're not going to reap either of those benefits if you don't apply discipline to the way you interpret the results.
I think the delta between these two, I mean, this is discussed over and over in the statistics literature, and there are camps. I think the bigger issue is the simpler problems above. Do you interpret p-value correctly, right? This is something that most of the organization doesn't get initially, and so it's more important to make sure people understand what the value means, the exact interpretation of, whether it's a frequentist interpretation or Bayesian, less important. We tend to, in my group, we tend to be more Bayesian in the sense that we try to apply Bayesian corrections. We look at priors, and we built a mechanism that allows us to expose the probability of success given the p-value based on the history. So.
No, awesome. I think most companies here are not in the world of science. They don't have the traffic to do that. They are in the world of making money. And if you're making money, I think Bayesian is more easy to understand and to explain to people in the company, because you can have so many mistakes explaining what's going on in the t-test. And people just don't get it, especially management doesn't get it. And they do get Bayesian statistics because it's just an easy thing. It's a business decision they have to make if they have to put it live or no. It's probably not a learning, but they probably will make money from it. So I'll go for Bayesian.
Mm-hmm. If I inherited a website that is suboptimally designed, coded, but I have to work within whatever the site is, where should I start? It's kind of a weird question, though. So let's skip that. How important is site speed? Yeah, okay. Well, can we test site speed? Can we run A/B tests on site speed, like intentionally slowing shit down? Ever done that?
Interesting question. There's lots of research out there that site speed is really important, and you should pay attention to it a lot. To test this stuff, of course, changing a code library or switching code libraries, that can be tested, but it's more easy to test at server side than client side. So yes, very important. When we do testing, we always put the same delay on the default than on the variation. If it's a large part of code that you inject through to the client, through Optimizely or Tag Manager whatsoever, it probably will slow down the page a bit. So you have to inject it too in the variation, or in the default, so you have the same site speed for both variations.
So I'll say there's a paper that we wrote called Rules of Thumb, and one of them is about, one of the rules is how critical performance is. So I can share with you that both at Amazon when I was there and at Microsoft, we run slowdown experiments. What that means is we take a website and we actually intentionally slow it down to look at the impact, and that helps us determine the ROI on performance investments, right? And what we find is that over and over again, performance is more critical than people think. So I'll give you, the sort of the rules of thumb summary that we gave the org is that on Bing, if you're able to improve performance, server-side performance, by 10 milliseconds, right? 10 milliseconds, that's like 30 times faster than we blink. You just paid for your yearly salary. It's about $250,000 to $500,000 to improve 10 milliseconds. So if you can do something with 100 milliseconds, boy, that's worth a lot. And that's how we are able to determine the return on investment. We have a nice, big performance team. At Amazon, we also share that result. I think 100 millisecond was 1% of revenue for Amazon. Big numbers. Performance is much more critical. Now, the one thing to think about is these tests are server-side performance in the sense that they slow down the whole page. If you start serving the page and the page looks okay, but some elements load late, that has very small impact. So you have to think about getting the perceived speed to be correct, right? Things above the fold, things that mostly show up correctly. The late loading of some components tends to be okay. Again, we test for these, but our observation is that if most of the page looks okay, things look, even if there's some component that loads late or some JavaScript that loads late, as long as people don't get to it and there's some sort of a time that people need to internalize what the site is, you're fine.
Awesome. Speed matters. Got it. So you're a one-person optimization team, but want to become a big person. Many, optimizers hanging out. So how do you grow an optimization program within a large organization?
So this is something I think about a lot, sort of organizational and operational metrics when it comes to conversion rate optimization. I think you as the sole resource have to really do a good job of quantifying and identifying your strengths, what you're really good at in terms of the conversion optimization stack. So is it strategy? Is it analysis? Where do you really struggle? So that could be design or development. And then what are the resources, the cheap resources available to you to kind of fill the gaps that you can't fill effectively? So that could be half-time, getting your team to commit to half-time resources, or 20% of every sprint gets assigned to optimization, or you rely on Upwork or some other freelancer network to provide sort of incremental design and development help. But I think first you have to understand, what am I good at? What can I make happen? Learn from events like this, go online, be scrappy, and then really zero in on what you actually need help with and find creative ways to get there, and then just keep testing. And then eventually it'll show the fruits of your labor and you will be able to invest in headcount.
Yes, I'll say show value.
And I'll just
you show value to the org, you'll get more resources.
And if you're just by yourself and are thinking how to start, come on, just do it.
Right on. All right. Some person asked here about features. So building new features versus optimizing existing features. Thoughts when to do one or the other?
I think it's a portfolio.
Yeah.
I think you have to have some people that work on risky features because you don't want to get stuck in a local minima. Those will mostly fail, but you got to give it a shot. I mean, look at competitors, look at some crazy ideas, try risky features. The risky features, by the way, for us, the cost of that is they usually end up being cost to develop because somebody wants to make a dramatic change. The actual, when you deploy it, it's okay. I mean, if it's really bad, you'll shut it down quickly. People improve. But we should have some people trying to get out of a local minima or maxima, depending on how you look. And we should have most people working on just trying to do incremental or smaller changes that are less risky to get you to the top of the hill that you're trying to get to.
I think the other thing is we see a lot that new product and optimization kind of have a cultural war internally. New product is sexy. Everybody wants to work on the new launch or the new thing. No one wants to like tweak little functionalities or flows. It's just not as sexy. So I think part of what you have to do is make optimization really exciting within the organization so it competes with the glamour of new product. And a lot of that is building stories about why you're successful in conversion rate optimization, and then even helping new product build optimization into their process. So when they launch, they're launching new product, but with 2 different versions. So they're sort of co-successes when you build out your product roadmap.
Thank you. All right, so guy with an e-commerce site, 200,000 unique visitors a month, 5,000 to 6,000 conversions. Any types of A/B tests that I don't have enough traffic to run?
Well, this is a 2.5–3% conversion rate, which is pretty decent for e-commerce nowadays. With this traffic, you can run the test. If you run a test for a week, you'll probably be fine already. Yeah. So you can run a test every week, or if it's smaller changes, take 2 weeks, take 3 weeks. I think that's a great amount of conversion. So any types of tests you cannot run, well, stupid tests, but you'll be fine in most tests.
27 component multivariate.
I would say you might not have enough traffic to run like secondary action A/B tests. So if you're looking at repeat purchase conversion A/B tests or doing some really edge case down the funnel, time analysis, or something like that, there could be a test you can't run. But sort of a straight conversion test, I think that you're pretty set.
Question about seasonality here. So something that might work well in May but doesn't work in November. Testing those things, implementing those things, how should we go about it?
Yeah, selling Easter eggs works in Easter.
Really?
I mean, honestly, it's a controlled experiment. So for most changes that are exogenous to the system, they tend to generalize well. There are holiday, seasonality, gift cards work well in some seasons. I think most of the people are aware of this, so they come in with the thinking of, is this going to generalize because I'm now in a holiday season? And like Claire said, if you run something in Christmas time, we recommend you repeat the experiment in a different season.
It's like window dressing. You don't want to change your website too much based on seasonality. If you're a travel agency, you know there's sudden highs and lows in conversion. But if you change your website completely during the low conversion season, people will still shop around. And if the website is changed when they return, that can be a conversion killer. So just do some window dressing and make it adjust to seasonal influences, but don't change too much.
Yeah.
All right, we have 6 minutes to go, so let's try to pack some more questions in here. So when I'm calculating my sample size for the test before I launch it, how do I set the expectation for the minimal detectable effect?
Which question are you reading?
Yeah, I'm not seeing
We're
that.
like none of
I'm
these
translating it.
So if you saw my talk this morning, I would make that estimate based on my historical performance on that page. So I would look at the average lift I've seen on other tests in that page and pick that. You can also set your minimum detectable lift based on sort of your risk tolerance and your traffic. So we work with a lot of low traffic sites who set that minimum detectable lift at a very high amount, and they cut tests really quickly if they're not hitting that, because they know they need a big win to get to a win quickly, and they would rather iterate quickly through new tests than wait for like a 5% lift for 6 months.
And so then the opposite side, so that we're on a test, we have a 5% lift in revenue, whatever. So how do we now quantify how much that 5% lift is actually in dollars?
That's easy, right? Multiply it out by revenue?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, we
you know,
do
I mean, probably the question is like the sample size for the test, you know, because not everybody in your site is probably part of the experiment, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so when we predict the actual impact of the test, we use a conservative decaying model. So we'll take the lift we observe in the test and take 3 different models of like 25% of that, 75% of that, or 50% of that, and 75% of that, and we'll model that over our projected traffic over time and do like a 25% decay of the lift over quarter. So that's how we calculate sort of predicted ROI on any given test lift.
Awesome. Favorite testing tool?
Experiment engine.
Google
No.
Tag Manager.
How do you keep up testing velocity and take time to analyze and learn from results before starting the next test?
Have a large team.
Perfect. Sold. Any other ideas?
I'll just say, I mean, we've built a whole platform so that we don't have to be involved in every experiment. I mean, the beauty of having a system like ours is that anybody can launch a test on their own. They don't need to talk to me. They get the results. The only time we get involved is in sort of office hours when they come and they need help in interpreting a result, or when they get the sample ratio mismatch, or when alarms fire. So we have a system that automatically looks at key variables, and it will go and fire off alarms and say, hey, something is going bad here. And if it's extremely bad, we automatically shut the experiments down. But this is the interaction that happens. But we run a lot of experiments. As I said, on a given day, 30 new experiments starts. There's typically something like 250 experiments running on any given day on Bing. So large volume of experiments running. We can't be involved in everything. We choose to do office hours and let people come to us to help.
Yeah. Automate stuff if you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fully agree.
So a question about sample pollution. So people delete cookies manually or automatically. How can we figure out how many people and how fast are they deleting cookies?
Cookie deletion is fun. You can do some real nasty injections of respawning stuff, which is not allowed, but at least then you can track how many cookies are deleted. So it can be fun to do a study like that. Just ask people for the multi-device issue. Ask people how many devices did you use recently to visit this website. It will give you a number.
There's a question about Ton's hair. So the way I imagine it, Ton goes to the barber shop and says, the mad scientist, please. Anyways, how do you increase conversion rates in a freemium model without risking growth? So, oh my God, maybe growth will happen. Anybody want to take that?
So I think the same principles apply. I mean, I don't know if this is asking about the tactics of optimization in a freemium model. Well, I used to work at EA and work on freemium games, so if anybody wants to talk about the specifics, I'm happy to afterwards. I think really what you want to look at is pick a primary goal on any of your tests that takes into account both the raw conversion rate and the long-term revenue value of any user. There's basically the quality of the conversion. This applies to lead generation, it applies to freemium models, it applies to SaaS. You just have to build what that right metric is for you and look at it in a consistent way.
And the very last question. When you consider mobile-first optimization, where does Google's new AMP thing fit into the plan?
That's a real question for you.
For me, huh?
It's a Google question.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. No idea.
I'm not the one to ask.
Okay, let's pick a new final question. Let's see here. What's a good one? How do you avoid or account for faster variant creating an imbalance in the traffic split?
That's a great question. And that's actually not a problem, in the sense that when you assign users, they have to be assigned, they have to be randomized equally or by whatever percentage you want. The fact that the treatment is slower or faster should not cause a sample ratio mismatch. What it will cause is users to come back less, but the number of users in an experiment will be balanced if you are running the experiment correctly. So what we see is that if one of the variants is faster or slower, it will typically, or slower will hurt. We will see that very clearly in the metrics. But as far as the test to make sure that users are balanced, you should validate that you're not getting a sample ratio mismatch and it will be balanced.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.